Susan Mitchell pulled another double shift without complaint. 16 hours. Her feet ached inside worn sneakers that had seen better days. Her scrubs, faded from countless washes, hung loosely on her thin frame. She stood at the nurse's station on the fourth floor of St. Catherine's Medical Center, updating patient charts with careful precision. Around her, the night shift bustled with controlled chaos. Monitors beeped. Families whispered in waiting rooms. The fluorescent lights hummed their endless, tireless song. "Susan!" The voice behind her was sharp, impatient. She turned. Donna Kirkpatrick, the head nurse, stood with her arms crossed, her expression tight with annoyance. "Yes?" Susan asked quietly. "Mrs. Chen in 4112 needs her bedding changed. The aide called in sick. You'll have to handle it." Susan glanced at her watch. Her shift had officially ended 20 minutes ago. She had another shift starting in 7 hours. "Of course," she said. Donna didn't thank her. She just turned and walked away, heels clicking efficiently down the corridor. Susan gathered fresh linens from the supply closet and headed toward room 412. Her movements were practiced, economical. She'd been doing this for 15 years, longer than some of the doctors had been practicing medicine. Mrs. Chen smiled when Susan entered. She was 83, recovering from hip surgery, frightened and alone. "I'm sorry for the trouble," Mrs. Chen whispered. Susan smiled gently. "No trouble at all. Let's get you comfortable." She changed the bedding carefully, talking softly to Mrs. Chen about her grandchildren, about the weather, about anything that might ease the woman's anxiety. When she finished, Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. "You're an angel," the elderly woman said. Susan patted her hand. "Just doing my job." She left the room and returned to the nurse's station to clock out. As she gathered her things, Dr. Raymond Foster walked past without acknowledging her. He was on his phone, laughing about weekend plans. Susan had trained Dr. Foster when he first started at St. Catherine's 3 years ago. He'd been nervous, unsure, constantly asking her questions about protocols and procedures. She'd stayed late countless nights, patiently guiding him through the complexities of the hospital systems. Now he walked past her like she was invisible. Susan slung her worn bag over her shoulder and headed for the elevator. She was too tired to care, too tired to feel anything except the deep, bone-level exhaustion that came from years of being overlooked. The elevator doors closed, and Susan leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. What no one at St. Catherine's knew, what no one had ever thought to ask, was that Susan Mitchell wasn't just any nurse. She was Susan Catherine Mitchell, daughter of Harold Mitchell, the man who'd founded St. Catherine's Medical Center 40 years ago. The man whose name was carved in marble in the building's lobby. The man whose fortune had built not just this hospital, but 3 others across the state. Susan was the sole heir to everything, and she'd been hiding in plain sight for 15 years. By the way, please let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and kindly subscribe for similar stories on this channel. Susan was 23 when her father sat her down in his study and told her his plan. "I want you to work at St. Catherine's," Harold said. He was 61 then, already showing signs of the illness that would take him 8 years later. "But not as my daughter, as a regular employee." Susan had just graduated with her nursing degree. She'd chosen nursing over medical school deliberately, wanting to be close to patients, to provide care with her own hands rather than from a distance. "Why?" she asked. Her father leaned back in his leather chair, his expression serious. "Because I need to know the truth about what I built. Hospital administrators, board members, department heads, they all tell me what they think I want to hear. They show me numbers and reports that paint pretty pictures. But I don't know what really happens on those floors. I don't know how staff are treated. I don't know if patients receive the care they deserve." Susan understood. Her father had built his empire on integrity. He'd grown up poor, worked his way through medical school, and never forgot what it felt like to be powerless, overlooked, dismissed. "You want me to be your eyes and ears," Susan said. "I want you to experience what it's really like," Harold corrected gently. "Not to spy, not to report back, but to truly understand the institution you'll inherit someday. To see it from the bottom up, not the top down. Can you do that?" Susan thought about it. She thought about the privilege she'd grown up with, the distance it created between her and the real world. She thought about her mother, who died when Susan was 12, a nurse herself who'd always emphasized the importance of humility and service. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." Her father smiled. "You'll use your mother's maiden name. Mitchell is common enough that no one will connect you to me. You'll apply like anyone else, interview like anyone else, work like anyone else. No special treatment. No one can know who you are." "How long?" Susan asked. Her father's expression grew distant. "As long as it takes for you to really understand." That conversation happened 15 years ago. Her father died 7 years ago, leaving everything to Susan in a carefully structured trust that wouldn't fully transfer to her control until her 38th birthday. Susan had kept working, kept hiding, kept learning, and what she'd learned had broken her heart. Susan's apartment was small, deliberately so. One bedroom in a modest building 20 minutes from the hospital. She could have afforded anything. Instead, she lived like her colleagues, on a nurse's salary, in a nurse's world. She unlocked her door at 2 in the morning and dropped her bag on the floor. Her body moved on autopilot, shower, toast, bed, but sleep didn't come. She lay in the dark, thinking about Mrs. Chen, thinking about the aide who'd called in sick because she wasn't really sick, just exhausted, thinking about the chronic understaffing that had gotten worse over the past 5 years, thinking about the nurses who'd quit, burned out and broken, replaced by younger, cheaper staff who were overworked just as quickly. Susan had watched St. Catherine's decline, not in dramatic ways, not in ways that showed up in annual reports or board presentations, but in small, corrosive ways that wore down everything her father had built. Staff were treated as expendable. Patient ratios had increased. Supply budgets had been cut. The focus had shifted from care to profit margins, slowly, gradually, until compassion became a luxury the hospital could no longer afford. And Susan had stayed silent, watching, documenting, waiting. For what? She wasn't sure anymore. Her phone buzzed. A text from Donna. "Can you cover Carol's shift tomorrow?" she called out. Susan stared at the message. Tomorrow was supposed to be her day off, her first in 11 days. She typed back, "I have another double tonight. I need rest." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Everyone's tired, Susan. We need team players." Susan closed her eyes. She knew what would happen if she refused. She'd be labeled difficult, uncooperative. Her shifts would get worse. She'd be assigned the hardest patients, the most thankless tasks. She'd watched it happen to other nurses who dared to set boundaries. "Okay," she typed, "I'll cover it." She set her phone down and stared at the ceiling. Something inside her had shifted tonight. Some final thread of patience had frayed beyond repair. Next month, she turned 38. Next month, the trust dissolved and everything became hers. Next month, the truth would come out. But what would she do with it? Susan's father had founded St. Catherine's with a clear vision, exceptional care, compassionate staff, dignity for every patient regardless of their ability to pay. For 20 years, it worked. The hospital thrived. Staff stayed for decades. Patients traveled across the state for treatment. Then Harold got sick. As his illness progressed, he'd handed daily operations to a board of directors he trusted. Good people, he'd assured Susan. People who shared his values. But good people could become corrupted by pressure, by market forces, by shareholders demanding returns on investments. After Harold died, the board hired Victor Brennan as CEO. He came from a large hospital chain, brought impressive credentials, and promised to modernize and optimize St. Catherine's operations. Susan watched him gut the place from the inside. It wasn't dramatic, it was methodical. He cut staff slowly, always justifying it with data about efficiency. He renegotiated supplier contracts, choosing cheaper options that saved money but compromised quality. He implemented electronic systems that looked good on paper, but created more work for nurses, pulling them away from patients. And he was brilliant at managing up. The board loved him. Donors loved him. The local press loved him. St. Catherine's financial performance had never looked better. But Susan, working the floors, saw the real cost. She saw nurses crying in supply closets. She saw patients waiting hours for basic care. She saw corners cut, protocols ignored, exhaustion normalized. She documented all of it, every violation, every complaint, every instance of neglect that resulted from understaffing. She kept files in a storage unit across town. Years of evidence, years of waiting. For what? She'd asked herself that question 1,000 times. The answer had always been to really understand, to see the full scope of what needed to change before taking control. But 15 years was a long time to watch people suffer. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Susan had just finished her third consecutive double shift. She was standing at the nurse's station, so tired her hands shook as she tried to update a patient chart. A new patient was being admitted to the floor. Cardiac event, critical condition. Protocol required 2 nurses for monitoring during the first hour. "Susan, you take him," Donna said, walking past with barely a glance. Susan looked up. "I'm about to clock out. I've been here 16 hours. Donna stopped, turned. Her expression was hard. "Are you refusing an assignment?" Susan's throat tightened. She'd seen this tactic before. Frame any boundary as insubordination. "I'm saying I'm not safe to provide care at this level of exhaustion," Susan said quietly. "Patient safety requires—" "I'll determine what patient safety requires," Donna interrupted. "Either take the assignment or go home and don't come back." The nurse's station went silent. Everyone was listening now. Susan looked at Donna, really looked at her. Donna wasn't a monster. She was just exhausted too, pressured from above, doing what she thought necessary to keep the floor running. But exhaustion didn't excuse cruelty. "I'll take the assignment," Susan said quietly, "but I'm documenting this conversation and submitting it to HR." Donna's eyes flashed. "Do what you need to do." Susan took the patient. She provided excellent care, as she always did. But something inside her had cracked open. When her shift finally ended, she didn't go home. She went to the hospital's Human Resources Department and filed a formal complaint about unsafe staffing levels and mandatory overtime. The HR director, a pleasant woman named Susan, listened sympathetically, took notes, and promised to investigate. Susan knew nothing would happen. She'd watched other nurses file similar complaints. They disappeared into a bureaucratic void, reviewed by committees that protected the hospital, not the staff. But Susan filed it anyway, because it went on record, because it added to the mountain of evidence she'd been building for 15 years. As she left the HR office, she saw him. Victor Brennan, the CEO, stepping out of the elevator. 52 years old, silver hair, expensive suit, confident smile. He walked right past her without seeing her. To him, she was just another nurse, interchangeable, forgettable. Susan stood very still, watching him disappear down the hallway toward his corner office. Something crystallized in that moment, something cold and clear. She was done hiding. Susan had 28 days until her 38th birthday. She requested a meeting with the board of directors, citing urgent concerns about hospital operations. She didn't use her real name. She submitted the request as Susan Mitchell, EORN, 15-year employee. The request was denied. Board meetings were for senior leadership only. Susan expected that. She submitted a formal written complaint instead, addressed to the board chairman, detailing unsafe conditions, staffing violations, and patterns of employee mistreatment. She received a form letter 2 weeks later, thanking her for her feedback and assuring her that Catherine's remained committed to excellence. Susan filed complaints with state regulators. She documented every violation meticulously, including dates, times, witnesses, and outcomes. The regulators sent inspectors. The hospital passed inspection. Victor Brennan was very good at making things look perfect when scrutiny arrived. Susan watched it all unfold with a strange, detached calm. She kept working, kept taking the extra shifts, kept providing the same quiet, excellent care she'd always provided. But she was also preparing. She met with lawyers. She reviewed her father's trust documents. She examined the corporate structure of St. Catherine's Medical Center and discovered something interesting. Her father had retained controlling interest in the hospital through a complex arrangement that had seemed standard but was actually quite clever. When the trust dissolved on Susan's 38th birthday, she wouldn't just inherit money. She'd inherit direct control of the hospital, not through the board, not through committees, direct control. Her father had built-in protections she'd never fully understood until now. He'd known institutions could corrupt. He'd prepared for the possibility that the people he trusted might fail. He'd left his daughter the power to fix it. Susan sat in her lawyer's office, reading through decades-old documents, and finally understood her father's full plan. He hadn't just wanted her to understand the hospital from the bottom up. He'd wanted her to have the moral authority to change it. Anyone could inherit power, but Susan had earned something more valuable: perspective, empathy, understanding of what it actually meant to work in the system she would control. "What do you want to do?" her lawyer asked. Susan looked up from the documents. "I want to make it right." Susan's 38th birthday fell on a Saturday. She worked that day as she had worked thousands of days before. She arrived at 6 in the morning for a 12-hour shift. She cared for 7 patients, all of them complex, all of them demanding. She worked through lunch. She stayed late when a patient crashed and needed emergency intervention. At 9 o'clock that night, she clocked out for the last time. No one knew it was her last shift. No one knew it was her birthday. She'd never mentioned personal details. To her colleagues, she was just Susan, quiet, reliable, always there. She walked to the elevator carrying nothing but her worn bag. The building was quiet, settled into night routine. She'd spent 15 years in these hallways. She knew every corner, every patient room, every supply closet. She knew where nurses went to cry. She knew which doctors were kind and which were cruel. She knew which aides worked through pain and which managers looked the other way. She knew everything. The elevator opened. Susan stepped in and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished metal. She looked tired, older than 38, worn down by years of being invisible, but her eyes were clear. The elevator descended. When the doors opened, Susan stepped into the marble lobby where her father's name was carved into the wall. Harold Catherine Mitchell, 1948-2017. Founder, healer, servant. Susan stood before the inscription, reading words she'd passed 1,000 times without stopping. Servant. That's what her father had been, what he'd taught her to be. But servanthood without power only enabled cruelty. Susan turned and walked out of St. Catherine's Medical Center. Tomorrow she would return, but not as a nurse. Monday morning, Susan Mitchell walked into St. Catherine's Medical Center through the front entrance, not the employee entrance, the main doors where patients and visitors entered. She wore a tailored suit. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, was styled simply but professionally. She carried a leather briefcase her father had given her years ago, before he died. She walked to the reception desk. The security guard, Marcus, had worked there for 20 years. He'd seen Susan 1,000 times in her scrubs, always friendly, always rushing. He didn't recognize her now. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I have a meeting with Victor Brennan," Susan said calmly. "Susan Catherine Mitchell." Marcus checked his computer. He frowned. "I don't see any appointment." "He'll want to see me," Susan said. "Tell him Harold Mitchell's daughter is here." Marcus's eyes widened. He picked up the phone immediately. 5 minutes later, Victor Brennan's assistant appeared, flustered and nervous. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Brennan will see you right away. Please follow me." Susan followed her to the elevator, up to the executive floor she'd never accessed before, down a hallway lined with expensive art, into Victor's corner office. Victor stood when she entered. His confident smile was in place, but his eyes were calculating, uncertain. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand, "this is an unexpected honor. I apologize for not having you on my calendar. If I'd known you were planning to visit—" "You didn't know because I didn't tell you," Susan said, shaking his hand briefly. She didn't sit, even though he gestured to a chair. I've been working here for 15 years. Victor's smile faltered. I'm sorry? As a nurse, fourth floor, night and day shifts. My name is on every schedule, every time card, every payroll record for the past 15 years. The color drained from Victor's face. Susan continued, her voice calm and measured. You walked past me in hallways. You rode elevators with me. Last month, I held a door open for you. You didn't say thank you. You didn't see me at all. Victor sank into his chair. I don't understand. My father wanted me to understand this hospital from the inside before I took control of it, Susan said. So I worked as a regular employee. No special treatment. No one knew who I was. She opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder. She set it on his desk. That's a summary of 15 years of documented safety violations, staffing complaints, and systemic failures in patient care. The full documentation is with my lawyers and state regulators. Victor stared at the folder like it might bite him. Susan's voice remained steady. As of midnight Saturday, my father's trust dissolved. I now hold controlling interest in St. Catherine's Medical Center. The board reports to me. You report to me. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. You should prepare your resignation. Victor found his voice. You can't just... We've increased revenue by 30% under my leadership. The financial metrics are meaningless if we're sacrificing care to achieve them. Susan interrupted quietly. My father didn't build this hospital to generate profit. He built it to serve people. You've forgotten that. I've kept this place running, Victor said, anger creeping into his voice. Do you know how difficult it is to manage a hospital in this economy? The pressures we face? The impossible standards? Yes, Susan said simply. I do know. I lived them for 15 years. I worked the understaffed floors. I held the hands of patients who waited too long for care. I watched nurses break down from exhaustion. I know exactly what your leadership has cost. Victor stood, trying to regain control. The board won't support a hostile takeover by someone with no executive experience. The board doesn't have a choice, Susan said. I hold controlling interest. Their positions are advisory, and I have no intention of making this hostile. I'm offering you a dignified exit. Take it. She closed her briefcase. The meeting is at 3 o'clock. I expect you to be there. She turned and walked out, leaving Victor standing in his office, the folder of evidence untouched on his desk. The emergency board meeting convened at 3 o'clock in the large conference room on the executive floor. 12 board members sat around the polished table, confused and concerned. Victor sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral, controlled. Susan entered last. She took a seat at the opposite end of the table, facing Victor. The board chairman, Douglas Emerson, cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, we're honored by your presence, but I'm unclear about the nature of this emergency meeting. Victor indicated, Victor Brennan's employment is being terminated effective immediately, Susan said calmly. I'm assuming direct operational control of St. Catherine's Medical Center. Silence. Douglas recovered first. Ms. Mitchell, with all due respect, you have no experience in hospital administration? Your father entrusted this board? My father entrusted me, Susan interrupted gently. The corporate structure is clear. I hold controlling interest. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm informing you of my decision. A woman at the middle of the table spoke up. Catherine Torres, the board's longtime financial advisor. Susan, we all respected your father deeply, but running a hospital requires expertise. Victor has increased our financial stability. At what cost? Susan asked. She opened her briefcase again, removing copies of her documentation. She slid them across the table. This is a summary of systemic failures that occurred under Victor's leadership. Unsafe staffing ratios, mandatory overtime violations, patient care delays, staff retention problems. The board members began reading. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to concern. I worked on the fourth floor for 15 years, Susan continued. I experienced these problems firsthand. I documented them meticulously. I also filed complaints through proper channels. HR complaints, regulatory complaints, formal concerns addressed to this board. She looked directly at Douglas. You sent me a form letter thanking me for my feedback. Douglas looked up from the document, realization dawning. You were the nurse who filed the complaint 6 months ago? I'm the nurse who filed dozens of complaints over 15 years, Susan said. I'm also the employee who worked more than 2,000 overtime hours in the past 3 years. I'm the person you walk past in hallways without seeing, and I'm Harold Mitchell's daughter, who now controls this hospital. Victor finally spoke. This is vindictive. You're angry about normal workplace conditions. No, Susan said quietly. I'm clear-eyed about systematic failures. There's a difference. She stood. My father built this hospital on a principle: dignity for everyone, patients and staff. That's not idealism. That's the foundation of sustainable care. You've eroded that foundation in pursuit of metrics that look good in annual reports, but destroy the people doing the actual work. She looked around the table. I'm not dismantling everything. I'm refocusing it. We're returning to adequate staffing levels. We're ending mandatory overtime. We're investing in staff support and retention. We're choosing quality over quarterly earnings, Catherine Torres spoke carefully. Susan, those changes will significantly impact our financial position. I know, Susan said. I'm prepared for that. This is a long-term investment in sustainability, not short-term profit maximization. Douglas leaned back in his chair. And if the board disagrees? Susan met his eyes. Then the board can resign. I'm not interested in governing by committee with people who don't share my father's vision. I'm interested in results, better care, better conditions, better outcomes. The room was silent. Finally, Victor stood. He was pale but composed. I'll submit my resignation in writing by end of day. Susan nodded. Thank you. Your severance package will be generous. I don't want to destroy your career. I just want you out of this hospital. Victor left without another word. Susan turned back to the board. I'm bringing in new leadership, people with clinical backgrounds who understand care delivery. I'm also promoting from within, staff who've proven their commitment to patients over years of service. She paused. Anyone who wants to be part of this change is welcome. Anyone who doesn't is free to leave. No hard feelings. But this hospital is going back to its roots. She gathered her materials. Meeting adjourned. I'll be in my father's office if anyone wants to discuss specifics. She walked out, leaving 12 board members in stunned silence. Susan sent an email to all hospital staff that evening. It was simple, direct, and honest. To the staff of St. Catherine's Medical Center, my name is Susan Catherine Mitchell. For the past 15 years, I've worked alongside you as a nurse on the 4th floor. Most of you knew me as Susan Mitchell. What you didn't know is that I'm Harold Mitchell's daughter, and as of this week, I've assumed control of this hospital. I worked among you because I needed to understand what my father built from the inside. I needed to experience the reality of care delivery, not the sanitized version presented in boardrooms. What I learned broke my heart. We've drifted from the principles my father founded this hospital on. We've prioritized financial metrics over people. We've asked impossible things of staff and called it efficiency. We've lost sight of why we exist. That changes now. Effective immediately, we're implementing new staffing ratios to ensure safe patient care and reasonable workloads. We're ending mandatory overtime. We're investing in support services, professional development, and workplace improvements. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will happen. I know many of you are tired. I know many of you have considered leaving. I'm asking you to stay, to give me time to make this right, to help me rebuild what we've lost. My door is open. Literally, I'll be on the floors regularly. Not as an administrator checking boxes, but as someone who understands your work because I did it beside you. Thank you for the care you've provided under impossible conditions. Thank you for staying when it would have been easier to leave. Thank you for seeing me as a colleague all these years, even when I couldn't tell you who I really was. We have a lot of work ahead, but we'll do it together. Susan Catherine Mitchell, St. Catherine's Medical Center. The email went out at 6 o'clock in the evening. By 7 o'clock, Susan's phone was flooded with responses. Some were angry, feeling deceived. Some were skeptical, doubting real change would come. But many were hopeful, cautiously, carefully hopeful. Susan read every response. She replied to everyone personally. She worked until midnight, sitting in her father's office, surrounded by his books and memories, trying to honor everything he'd taught her about service and humility and the complicated work of healing. 6 months later, Susan stood at the nurse's station on the 4th floor. Not as CEO making an inspection tour, but as someone who still came here regularly, checking in, listening, present. The floor looked different, same layout, same rooms, but the energy had shifted. There were more nurses on duty. The aides weren't running themselves into exhaustion. Staff were talking, laughing occasionally, moving with purpose instead of panic. It hadn't been easy. The financial adjustments were significant. Some board members had resigned, some donors had withdrawn support, uncomfortable with the new priorities. But patient outcomes had improved. Staff retention had increased. The nurses who'd been ready to quit 6 months ago were still here, still working, still caring. Susan had promoted Donna to director of nursing, despite their difficult history. Donna had earned it through years of trying to hold impossible situations together. Now she had the resources to do it right. They'd hired 50 new staff members. They'd invested in updated equipment. They'd created support systems for burned-out employees. And Susan had kept her promise. She was here regularly, not as a distant executive, but as someone who understood the work because she'd lived it. A young nurse approached her. Maya Rodriguez, hired 3 months ago, bright and nervous and full of idealism. "Ms. Mitchell, can I ask you something?" "Call me Susan," Susan said, as she always did. "And yes." "Is it true," Maya asked, "that you really worked as a regular nurse here for 15 years? "Yes," Susan said. "Why?" Susan thought about how to answer. She could give the official explanation, the strategic reasons, the leadership development rationale, but she decided on the truth. "Because my father taught me that you can't lead people through experiences you've never had," Susan said. "You can't ask people to endure what you wouldn't endure yourself, and you can't build something meaningful from a distance." Maya nodded slowly. "My nursing school professors say healthcare is broken, that it's all about money now, that caring doesn't matter anymore." Susan looked around the floor, at the nurses providing patient care, at the aides helping families, at the doctors collaborating instead of dictating. "Healthcare isn't broken," Susan said quietly. "But we broke it. We can fix it. It just requires remembering why we started doing this work in the first place." She smiled at Maya. "It's not about the money. It never was. Your professors are right that the system prioritizes profit, but we can build places inside that system that prioritize people. We just have to be intentional about it." Maya looked hopeful. Susan recognized that expression. She'd felt it herself once, before 15 years of exhaustion had dimmed it. "Go take your break," Susan said. "You've earned it." Maya left. Susan stayed at the nurse's station, updating charts, presenting the work, exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed. A message from Douglas Emerson, the board chairman who'd stayed. "Financial review shows we're stabilizing. Donor meeting went well. People are starting to understand what we're building." Susan smiled. It was working, slowly, imperfectly, but working. She finished her charts and headed toward the elevator. As she walked through the lobby, she paused at her father's memorial inscription, Harold Catherine Mitchell, founder, healer, servant. She'd spent 15 years trying to understand what those words meant, trying to earn the right to carry them forward. She didn't know if she'd succeeded, but she was trying. Every day she was trying. Susan pushed through the front doors into the cool evening air. Somewhere behind her, in the hospital her father built, nurses were caring for patients. Aides were providing comfort. Doctors were healing. And it was working. Not perfectly, but honestly. That, Susan thought, was enough. She got in her car and drove home, tired but whole, carrying the weight of responsibility her father had given her. She carried it differently than he had. She carried it with the scars of being overlooked, undervalued, overworked. Those scars made her stronger, made her wiser, made her exactly the leader St. Catherine's needed. Susan turned on the radio and drove through the city, thinking about tomorrow, about the work ahead, about all the ways she would continue her father's legacy. Not by being him, but by being herself. The nurse who'd worked in silence for 15 years, learning, documenting, preparing. The daughter who finally stepped into the light, carrying everything those silent years had taught her. And the leader who understood that real power wasn't about control, it was about service, just like her father always knew. Did you enjoy this story? Please consider subscribing for more. Thank you.